Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Yevamot daf Nun Beis. We're going to begin on the bottom of Nun Aleph Amud Beis, very last line. Ketzad Asa Maimer. So we've been discussing the past couple of dafim based on the beginning of this new parak, the din of Rabbi Gamliel and Chachamim. They argue whether there's get after get, Maimer after Maimer, and then the question is, what's the din if, let's say, Maimer was done first and then you did other things afterwards? So as we continue to Nun Beis Amud Aleph. Now, Hai get, Acher Gethu. So he says, this is like a case of get after get. Says Rashi, Bitmia, B'chize get, Acher get, the Tani Reisha, B'chachamim Armi Yesh get Acher get. Mafarish Ketzad Asa Maimer, Dahainu get Acher Maimer. This is a case of a get after Maimer. So Rabbi Yehuda Hachikamer, get achar get. If a person gives a get after the get was already given, will Maimer achar Maimer. A person does Maimer after Maimer, kedamra. That we already know what the din is. It's machlokas. Yabam echad v'yevama achas. Ketzad hataratan. So when it comes to one yavam and two Yevamot, one Yevama. So exactly how do we permit this? You have one Yavam and one Yevama. So Asa Maimer b'Yevimto. So he says you get Maimer was done with the Yevama, v'nosno a get, and then you give her a get to remove the Maimer, and then Srich Yimenu Chalitza. You need to do Chalitza. Asa Maimer uboil harizuk mitzvasa. So if you did Maimer, and then you did bia, that is the mitzvah, which is mashma, that you're supposed to really do maimer first. So lema masaili Rav Huna di'ema Rav Huna mitzvahs yavama mekadesh v'achach boil. So we see, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be first be mekadesh and then be boil. So ema afze kimitzvasa. It doesn't mean that this is the way of doing things. You could even just do the bia right away. So pshita l'cheretz davar pasha salcha dat techamina kivandi amar ha'isa maimer b'yavimtai. Someone who does maimer with his yavama parchimenu zika sivamin, so it removes the zika of being a yavama to the other guys. The chol of zikas erusin, and all of a sudden she now takes upon herself no longer the status as like a shemer shavam. But since you did like a kedushin act, so there it's like it's an erison, v'nesuin. So ema la mitzvah ka'avid. So therefore you'd think maybe it's really not the proper way of doing it. Kamash Milan, that it's okay. So even though you're doing an act which is really the removal of her zika, because you're doing really a kedushin act, nonetheless it's okay. Kufa Omer Avuna mitzvah sivam mekadosh v'achach boil. V'im boil v'yasa maimer kana. But if let's say you did bia and then you did maimer, so you're also kind in that situation as well. So in boil v'yasa maimer pshita the kanya b'bia. Well, what does that mean? Once you do bia, that's it. So if you do maimer afterwards, what is the maimer? Giving her money? It doesn't seem to have any validity or meaning because you already did bia with her, so she's your wife. Im boil below maimer kana. It says that if you did bia without maimer, then you're still kind of her. Aibosanyo loke. But it says elsewhere, loke says Rashi, Ein malchus or boyim el al divrei Torah. The only time you're going to give malchus is when it's a Isser Torah. Alma deraisahi vehechi amrit kana. So he must have been done something wrong. The answer is malchus mardus midrabanan. The malchus that's being given is malchus mardus for like an element of rebelliousness. Says Rashi, Shenag kalos roish ba'atzmo. You've acted like with an element of lightheadedness, that this is the way that you're going to be initiating this relationship with this woman, is by just having bia with her, instead of first doing like a woman, like a normal circumstance, by first giving her kedushay kesef or maimer, and then afterwards doing bia. How do we see that there's an element of malchus mardus by a person who does bia without maimer? To Rab mangid man mekadosh b'bia. We see that's actually what Rab did. He would give malchus mardus for someone who is mekadosh with bia. Also man mekadosh b'shuka, someone who is mekadosh woman like in the marketplace, which basically shows that it's not something which is of great levels of honor and an element of lack of modesty. Someone who's Makadish without any connection. You just are Makadish her right away, almost like you didn't even have the opportunity to get to know this woman at all. Rashi says, Bashuka ika bekas afil bekasva, the minig zilus upritzusi. It's a lowly thing to do. Weiter, umanda mavatal gita, someone who's mavatal a get. In this case, for example, not everyone knows that the get is batal and thinks it's a good get. So that's the issue. If you're mavatal a get, so because of that, the question is, it looks like it's a good get because it looks like a regular document, but you're mavatal it. Umanda maser moida agita, and a person who was placed a moida on giving a get, he was being forced to have to give a get. Says Rashi, "Afilu hoyim avato kol moidoi mikol makom hoyim malko isam mishum demoitzi laz al haget." The afilu the shama b'moida v'lo shama b'bittel. Okay, man the pakir shalicha d'Rabbanan, someone who, as Rashi says, chutzpah, someone who shows a lack of respect to the agents, to the messengers of the Rabbanan. Man the shahi shamta d'Rabbanan, or someone who basically doesn't care about the excommunication that the Rabbanan placed upon you, Tlasin Yomin, which took place for 30 days. Beidina, and you didn't come to Beis Din, V'tava l'shamte, to try to address this issue. So the fact that you were excommunicated, you didn't even show any concern, the fact that you were excommunicated, that you get malchus. Yelchasna didar bivnei chamuhi. So a son-in-law who lives in the house of his mother-in-law. In those days, there was a very close relationship with the mother-in-law. You can understand, first of all, the mother-in-law and the child were probably very close in age to one another, maybe 15 years, 18 years, 20 years. But in addition to that possibility, there was just a very close connection. As you can understand, like mother, like daughter. And therefore, if you had this connection to the daughter, you have a connection also to her. And Rashi says, chshad. So the fact that the daughter in the cholaf lo, only if you live there, but not if you pass by. Vahu the cholaf ababa debei chamuhi v'nagdi Rav Sheshus. Rav Sheshus used to give malchus to someone who even passed by. So her answer is, hahu made them havidoyim mechamase. So this was actually an unusual circumstance because there was already rumors about this relationship prior. So normally just passing by, you wouldn't give malchus. But for this case, because there was already an element of suspect, so therefore that's when we were more strict. The truth is, Rav was not so quick to give everyone malchus. Only if you're Makadish with Bia and you had no prior relationship with her before. That's what it's referring to. Even if there was a shidduch of some sort, but having Bia with her, that's how you're Makadish her, that's how you marry her, that's not something which he felt was good, that's pritzus. Says Taisus, Hadar bebeis chama, vanan samchinan ahanar doi, diamri bekul lo mangid rav, that we hold like this shita, el amanda makadish bebia, de b'shel soifrim holich achar hamekel, because we go after the more lenient opinion. That's probably what happened. Tanobam, Ketzad Maimer. What exactly is this Maimer which is done to the Shomer Shavam? So Nasan la Kesef, or Shavakesef. You either give her money or something of some monetary value. And on this Rashi says, the Amrullah is supposed to say to her, Hiskadshi li b'Maimer Yevamin. So that's the declaration that a person is supposed to say. Okay, so that is when it comes to giving money. It was shtar, when it comes to giving, if you want to be Mekadosh with a shtar, Ketzad b'shtar. So, Ketzad k'de amran, we said it already. Kasav law al hanayir, well, cheres, you can write on a paper on earthenware, alpha b'shin bo sheva pruta, doesn't have to be worth a sheva pruta. If it was a sheva pruta, that's already sheva kesef, so therefore it wouldn't fall into the din of kesef, of shtar. So therefore, hariyat mukadashasli. So Rabbi Hachikam, this is the question. Shtar ksumas yevamin. when it comes to it, not for kedushin, but for shtar ksuvas yavamin, ketzad kasavlo. So you write like this: Ana ploini bar ploini, I so and so, kabelis yas ploinis yavimti, olai am makabel to provide for my yavama by writing on the shtar lazun to sustain you afar nasa koroi, and to be able to give you the proper financial needs as one should provide. However, the ksuba is going to be based on my brother who had died. His ksuba is it. So those assets are going to be connected to his ksuba. However, let's say the brother who died has nothing, he has no assets. So then the second brother, the one who's now doing yibum with her, he's the one that does the ksuba. Because we don't want her to be kal be'enav. And therefore, because of that, he'll take upon himself this new responsibility. So Abai asked a question. Nasan laget. So let's say he gave a get, and Rashi says this is referring to a yavam. Gave to his yavimtoy, the shemer shavam, a get. Instead of doing chalitza, he gave a get. So we said normally you have to do mimer on that. You have to do, if you give a get, so that's already removing her a little bit. So we say like this: Nasnal get the Amr Hariyat Megareshas Himeni. So once he makes this declaration and gives her a get, he no longer is able to do yibum with her because he's already removed her a bit from that potential of bringing her close. But he didn't just say Har Megareshas Himeni. He said V'iyat Muteres Chaladam. You are not permitted to anyone else. So Mahu, what is the din in that situation? Look in Rashi. What is the din l'poisal achav? Once that's done, will she now be puzzled to the other brothers? Va'alav b'hai gita to take him yivne, because of lo yivne, that causes that now she can no longer marry this man who gave the get. So the question is, hai get lo mahani be'eshas ish. This get wouldn't help when it comes to a regular woman. So it doesn't. You make that statement when you give a get. The whole notion of a get is hariyat materes choladim, which is the last thing is written on a get. So get yavama the rabbanan, who, since the whole notion of giving a get to yavama is only the rabbanan, because really the whole notion of removing a woman who is yavama is through chalitza. So get the mahani beishas ish mahani biyavama. The notion of a get working for a regular marriage will be comparable to that of a yavama. Get the lo mahani beishas ish lo mahani biyavama. But the element in which a get will not help in removing an eishas ish will also not help the yavama. Oh, Dilmore, maybe asal achlufi begita. Maybe the problem is you may end up getting confused when it comes to the dinim of gittin. Says Rashi, what you may end up doing is v'lichnos yavama achar get. You may end up marrying the yavama after the get is given, and that cannot be done. So basically, the question is, could we do yibum now that this get psul was given? So what's the din? Are these brothers able to do that? So Amalei chashin and dilmasal achlufe begita. So just like when it comes to Eishes Ish, this woman, once the brother gives the get, that's it. So maybe also we're going to say the same thing when it comes to here, because if we say even though it's a get psula, doesn't have the same strength as a regular get, because you still have to do mimer and you still have to do chalitza afterwards. Nonetheless, the din is that it's enough that it will not. The brothers will no longer allow the brothers to marry her. So Maskav Rabba Bar Chanan, he asks a question. El miata yoivli nar be'alma. Just give her a blank piece of paper. Hachanam to pasla. Is that also going to pasel her? So Amalei Hasam will pasel b'kahuna. Hacha kapasel b'kahuna. There's a difference between giving a blank paper and this. Says Rashi, Hacha pasel b'kahuna. Kohen shenasan get. If a Kohen would give his wife a get, kazeh, leishto asra alav, it will answer her to him. The hilkach tiboilon imahani midrabanan. The question is, will this also have any validity also midrabanan? So we see that this actually does have power. It's not just like a blank piece of paper. It's enough that if the Kohen would give this to his wife, it would passel her for him marrying her. She's like a gerusha in that case, in this regard. Why? The Sanya. The Isha gerusha miisha, or yikachu. A feel in this garsha el miisha. Even if she's only divorced from her husband. In other words, if he made this declaration and says, you're divorced from me, but you're not mutter to everyone else. So in that situation, still lo yikachu. Still, this Kohen is not allowed to take. So that's the drasha. Even though it's not really a get, you can't do this because a get is supposed to be a krisus. But nonetheless, it's enough that by writing this get is created now that the Kohen can no longer marry her. V'hainu reach get shepoisel b'kahuna. This is like, it smells like a get, and it will passel b'kahuna. That's what it means. Okay, says Rashi, how is that get? V'im nasnu. Okay. So even though it's a get psula, nonetheless it'll still aser. Question number 5. Nasan get v'yarmel haret migareshes himeni. How, so you're divorced from me, but not to anyone else. Iyata muter sochaladam. Le'inyan ma mahani get zeh min rabbanan. In what way is this considered to be a get min rabbanan? So one, as we said, it will passel to kahuna. She's no longer able to marry a Kohen, or even this man. And passel Yevamot min Yibum. It will also passel the Yevamot from Yibum for kama below Yivne. So therefore, Yibum can no longer be done, even though this is really not anything, because it's not a valid get. It's a get psula, because you can't say it this way, saying that you're still not mutul chaladam. That's not what a get is. A get is harit mitesu chaladam. The reality is, it still works. It's enough to kick in lo yivne, and therefore he could no longer do yibum with her. Okay. Weiter. That's a reach get. So it smells like a get. Okay. Amar Bar Chama Hari Amru. We said, Amar Echad L'Lavlar. The person said to a scribe, Kasov get Rusasi. I want you to write to my wife who I did erison with. So I'm engaged, and during the time of erison, you are allowed to give a get, because you have an obligation to give her a get if you want to divorce her, because you have that level of connection. But this is what he wants to say. That when I marry her, I'm going to divorce you. It's kind of hard to imagine the person would do that. When I do nesuin with you, I'm going to have you divorced. So how does that get? Maybe it should be yadul garsha. Because right now he has the ability to be able to divorce her if he wants at this moment when it's being written, so therefore it works. So again, if you would say at the time of erison that I want you to write that when I marry you, I'm going to divorce you, that works, because biyadul garsha, because it is in your hands to do so. This is going to be TA 5. And also, I think the exact same question, TB7. TB7. We'll get back and read those questions soon. Let's continue to Nun Beis Amud Beis. However, that's when it was B'Shas Erison. However, says the Gemara, Alma, let's say to a woman in general. In other words, before you even did Kedushin, you had this written, Ein get. So that's not a get. At the time that it was written, she wasn't your wife at all. So it has to be, the get has to be written the time in which you could give it. You can't write a get before you do Kedushin. So the question that the Gemara wonders is, what's the din when it comes to a Yavama? Kivan diagida bay, since she has this connection to you, there's some zika, because in that case maybe it's karusasai damya, and therefore it's, if it was written at that time, it'll work. The reality is you didn't do anything. By the other case, you at least did kedushin. He didn't do anything. On this is a teku. Okay, so now let's see the Gemara. Let's see these questions. TA 5. Matai mahani lichtov get koidim shekanas v'yitin lo achar kach. So he said, as long as Barusa, while she was engaged, it was written. However, Be'isha Ba'alma Lo Mahani. However, Yevamot, as we said, it is a suffix. So that was TA 5. And this is also TB 7. Let's see how he writes it over here. For question 7, Kishoy Sarusa B'Sha Shekasvu Moyel. Kishoy Sarusa Inu Moyel. Okay, so it's similar, just adds a couple lines, a couple words. It also says ayin taisus. Okay. So Taisus says, when it comes to levimto mahu, the whole question is not just stam, can you do this, but rather it's the whole notion is the poisel mekahuna miboile. The whole question is, the Re says whether that this would work enough to pasul the kahuna, which again makes sense because it's a connection to what we were just saying before. Ayin Tosus. Boy Reb Chananya. So now Reb Chananya asks a different question. He says like this: Kosav get lazikasai v'lo lamamaro, or lamamaro v'lo lazikaso mahu. So a person who, again, it's a Yevamot, so he wrote a get for her, but instead of just giving this get, he says, I only wanted to remove the zika, but not the mimer. So let's say he did mimer. I don't want to remove the mimer, I just want to remove the zika. Or I want to remove the mimer, but not the zika. Now the truth is, the get that you give to your Yevamot actually should accomplish both. Says Rashi, V'hu asala mimer tchila. If he did mimer first, ma'u shedipasala bekach. So Kumar explains this a little bit more. Mimer iluya zika karami. So the mimer is like being added on to the zika. V'havi le'kemegarish chatzi isha. It's all, therefore, like each one a get removes both of these halves, and therefore it's like you're only divorcing half a wife. So giving that get really was like you didn't do anything. So therefore it's like nothing that you did. Each one stands on its own, so you can actually do this. As Rashi Mahani, it actually has some meaning, this get. The asura alav, and therefore because the get actually means something, now she is usher to you. You can't do yibum anymore according to this. The al-acham on the brothers. The pakazika bekama b'lo yivne. We now have the din of lo yivne. V'kasav lo mamara b'lo zikasa asura lo. And if he wrote it the other way around, that it's I'm removing the mimer but not the zika, so it's usher to you still. However, muter so achiv, it'll be muter to the brothers. The mimer the avid shakle upashale zika kimikara. Okay, well, our answer is like this: the tipshitle mid the Rabbi. Diamar Rabbi nasin get lamamaro. He says that if a person gives a get only for the mimer but not for the zika, which seems like to our question, hutra tsarasa. He says that the co-wife is mutter. So we see each are separate. He could give a get for the mimer, but not for the zika, because that is enough to remove the co-wife. So Rav Pshitale, Rav Chanani Meboile, my teku. So right, according to him, it's a davar pashit. He considered to be it's pshita that it works. However, Rav Chanani was unsure. Next Gemara says cholitz v'yasa mimer. So as we said, if the first thing you did was chalitza, that's perfect. Did chalitza first, doesn't make any difference what we did afterwards. You don't have to do any other actions afterwards. She's completely removed. So Amar Bihud Amar Rav, Zud Diva Rabbi Kiva. This is only going to sheet the Rabbi Kiva. Why? The Amar Ein Kedushin Taisim Mechavi Lavin. So what does this mean? So he did chalitza. Once you do chalitza, that's it. You're not allowed to marry her. It's a lo yivna. That's a lav. So therefore, even if you did mimer afterwards, or bia, which seems to be like you're trying to do kedushin, According to Rabbi Kiva, you cannot do that because kedushin is not typhus on a lav, and therefore, since you already did chalitza, there's a lav now to marry her, a lo yivna. So therefore, for him, once chalitza is done, all these other things don't mean anything. Therefore, you don't have to do anything to remove the mimer or the bia. According to the Chacham, they say no, because since kedushin is typhus b'chavi lavin, so therefore, even though you did chalitza, you can, if you do yibum afterwards, or to bia or mimer, has some validity. So therefore, you need a get and maybe another chalitza to remove them. Umi matzah smoking the look Rabbi Kiva. So what are we doing? We're saying this whole din of our mission is like Rabbi Kiva. Valkatani Reisha. What does the Reisha say? Nosan get. Let's say he first gave a get, v'asa mimer, and then he did mimer. So stricha get v'chalitza. He says that you need to give a get because you did mimer, and you also need to do chalitza. Now v'i Rabbi Kiva, kivan di'arvo get. Once he already gave her a get, which removed her from him, it's a din already lo yivne, mi mahani bo mimer. Why would mimer help? Right? Because again, kedushin is not typhus b'chavi lavin. That once you give a get to the Yevama, sheneso lava lamas, she's always usher. You can't, mimer won't help. So therefore, mimer is nothing. So therefore, again, l'chayra, you shouldn't have to do anything at all, according to Rabbi Kiva. Shnemer lo yuchal bal harishon asher shilcha achar shiluach. Some Rav Ashi. So how do we explain this? How could it possibly like Rabbi Akiva? I understand the first part, that if you did chalitza, so the Mishnah says you don't have to do anything else afterwards, because once that's a kedushin taisin b'chavi lavin. So then why in the case if you first did a get and then you did mimer that you have to do anything either? Because once you gave a get, that also removes her, just like chalitza. So Omer Rav Ashi get Yevamin midrabanan, because when chalitza is done, that's a din deraisa, and therefore that's a chavi lav to marry her. However, a get that's given to the Yevama, that's only a rabbanon, v'kras machtavi alma, and therefore it's not really a lav, and that's the reason why if you do mimer afterwards, even according to Rabbi Kiva, you actually still have to do something to remove the mimer. This is only according to Rabbi Kiva. Shahaya oisa chalutza ke'ereva. And he says that once you do chalitza, it's like an ereva, and you can't do mimer after. So because of that, that's why once you did chalitza, that's it. You don't have to do anything else to remove the mimer, because the mimer means nothing. The Chachamim disagree and say that there is after chalitza, you have to do something, because they hold kedushin as typhus b'chavi lavin. Ani omer emosai b'zman shekitchel l'shem ishus. That's only if a person did a l'shem ishus, and that's the situation. B'kitchel l'shem yavmus in achar chalitza klum. However, if it was done l'shem yavmus, then in achar chalitza klum. And therefore, once chalitza was done, no longer do you have to do anything. Says Rashi, "Avol kachel shem yivamus einan kedushin shari ein kan san yibum v'habli kedushi tois tani idach hachayilitz liyavimtoi." So let's say a person did chalitza to Yevama, v'chazar, and after he did already chalitza, v'kitsha, he did mimer with her. So he did chalitza, which removed her, and then he did mimer. So again, according to the sheet of Rabbi Kiva, that mimer means nothing, because kedushin is not going to be chat, it's not going to be typhus. Rabbi Omer im kitchel l'shum isho sricha menu get l'shum himenu get. If the reason why he gave this was l'shum ishos, then you have to give a get, because it's like a regular wife. L'shum yavmus in sricha menu get, which again is like the sheet of Rabbi Akiva, because it's not typhus if we're talking about l'shum yavmus. L'shum ishos, it's like kedushin gemur, Rashi says. It's not like mimer. Devadi kedushin taisim b'chavi lavin. Okay. Chom armim ben shekitchel l'shum ishos ben shekitchel l'shum yavmus sricha menu get. So Rabbi Yosef might tell the Rabbi. So why does Rabbi say this chiluk between l'shum yavmus l'shum ishos? So Asua, so there's numerous answers. He says like this. First teretz we attempt is Asua k'oider b'nechse hager. It's comparable to a person who is digging a yard that belongs to a convert, and you want to be able to be kinda this, because the ger dies, he has no relatives, and therefore, since you're doing some kinyan on this ground, it should be yours. However, ksavar shalohin, you think that it's already yours, the lokani. In that case, you're not going to acquire it, says Rashi. Behind Nami, savar shikadushi yavama taisinba. You thought that the kedushin yavama actually works. V'neschaben liknos el mekaychavume achiv v'ha pakulahu. That the only reason why you would think it works is you were not mechaven to acquire her except through the kayach of the yavama of the brother, and that actually released her. So therefore, because of that, if it was Oshim Yavmos, it doesn't do anything. So the Gemara says, 1 second. You're telling me that there's no kavana, There was kavana in this situation on the Yavama. When it comes to the ger, he had no intention to be kainit, because he actually thought it was his. In this situation, he wants to acquire the wife. So it's really not the same thing. Actually, if you want to compare it of kavana, of just making a mistake of thinking one over the other, is where you had the intention to be kind of the land of one convert and end up being someone else's, but it doesn't matter. You still have the kavanas, therefore it works. So this should be the same thing. That if you're mekadosh l'shum yavmus, so maybe in that situation it should work. El omer baya hachmai skina kagandi armula hiskachli b'maimer yavamin. He said, I want be mekadosh me with the mimer of a yavama. Rabbi Savar mimer iluya zika karami, that the mimer actually goes on top of the zika. Yasoy chalitza. So if chalitza was done, afkase lazika, it removes the zika. So mimer does not take effect either, because the whole notion of mimer is only in connection to the zika. But once the zika is removed by doing chalitza, the mimer is nothing also. And that's the reason why, again, a person, once you're chayletz liyavimta v'chazer v'kidsha, that once you did chalitza to the yavama, and then you did mimer afterwards, if you did the mimer because it was a shame ishos, then you need to give a get, because it looks like kedushin. But it was a shim yavmos, you don't have to give a get, because the whole mimer is in connection to the zika. But if there is no zika because the chalitza was done, so then the mimer means nothing also. And therefore, because of that, you don't need to give a get after the mimer. Rabbanan sabri haylo chudikoi v'haylo chudikoi. The Rabbanan who say that it doesn't make any difference in either situation, they both say you still need to give a get, is because they're considered to be separate. Even if the zika is removed, still there is this element of mimer, and therefore you need to give a get to remove the mimer. So that's how he explains it. Mikara l'chudikoi. Mikara ilu oimrle hiskachuli b'mimer yavamin milo mahani hashtanam mahani. Originally, if he said marry me with mimer yavamin, it would work, so it should work here also. The fact that chalitza was done shouldn't make any difference, because the chalitza just removes the zika. But you still have to remove the mimer, and therefore a get needs to still be given. Rav Omer id Omer le b'mimer yavamin kol yamlo plegid mahanya. You're right. If you would say that I want to give after the chalitza a mimer of yavam, it actually will work enough that you need to remove it with a get. You say it not that you want to be mekadosh with the mimer of Yevama, but rather with the zika of Yevaman. So Rabbi Savar, as we continue to Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, Yesh Zika, there is this strong connection of zika. The asoy chalitza, but the chalitza then comes a fakte l'zika, and it removes the zika completely. And therefore, again, because of that, no longer does it do anything. For a banan savri, and therefore you don't need to give a get. For a banan savri, ein zika, he says that there is no zika. Says Rashi, "Ein koyach l'zika, b'afil hachem yikari havi maimer, mikara ilu oimer lo hiskay shli b'zikas yavamin milu mahani hashtanami mahani." And therefore, according to this, it works enough that a get needs to be given. Okay, there's a couple more answers to explain this. We'll stop here. Let's see if there's a couple more questions that we have. Question 5 we did. Question 6. Chalatz v'asaba maimer. So you did chalitza, then maimer, but my kamifli. So again, according to Rabbi Kiva, it's nothing. But Rabbi and Rabbanan, it says it's totally if it was done with the intention of l'shum yavmos, l'shum ishus. So he says like this: Im sricha imenu get. Do you need to give a get afterwards in order to remove this mimer? You did chalitza, then you did mimer. The question is the intention, how you did the mimer. L'bayadi omer pligi bin omer lahiskad shili b'mimer yavamin. So what exactly is this machlokas if he said, marry me b'mimer yavamin? So again, if he said, so this is according to the second answer that we saw. So he says like this: Im mimer. The question is mimer ilui zika? Does it go on top of the zika? Karami b'hacha the paka zika. Therefore, once you move the zika by doing chalitza, lake a mimer. So therefore, mimer afterwards is nothing. Oh. The hailo chudi koi, the hailo chudi koi. Each one is separate. Mimer the hacha can mikar, and therefore the mimer is still mimer, and therefore because of that you still need to give a get in order to remove the mimer. Adkan.